Hello, NFT Land. I'm Creatorius Rex. We are back once again with the Twin this week in NFT news, and we have lots of cool stuff to break down for you. And we also have Scott Leach. Hey, Scott.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. Okay, we've got a lot to get through today. We're going to get right into some market data. We're going to talk a little bit about Bored Ape Yacht Club. They've been in the news a lot lately. Maybe some hacks. We didn't get to all the hacks stories last week, so we'll hit a couple of those. And then we'll wrap it up. But I did want to get right into the top story of the week. And this is the idea of the NFT sales. And so we didn't talk about the year-end 2021 sales, but we need to orient people around this. So some of that data wasn't really available right after the end of the year. We've got some more data now, which looks a little more solid. So the big number is 25 billion in NFT sales for 2021. And you have a chart here that shows that there was almost 12 billion in the fourth quarter alone. And the fourth quarter being the NFT recession for most of it, if we all recall.
Yeah. That's still a lot of money.
Well, just think of it this way. In 2020, the year previous to 2021, as people who know math and in time will understand, there were about $330 million, less than $400 million in NFT sales. The first quarter of last year tripled that. And then obviously there's a huge jump between Q2 and Q3. And what we're seeing here is Q3 was not an anomaly. And just looking at the January data, which we did a couple weeks ago, maybe it was last week, for OpenSea, they did 5 billion in the first month. So I think we're certainly ahead of that track.
Yeah.
And there's some other data which we'll see, which is around.
Yeah, but this is interesting though, because to your point, Q4 is when we started to see the chart doesn't feel right at first glance based on what it felt like to be trading in Q4. It seemed like there was less going on. That's an interesting number to see.
Well, yeah, it is. And so it's interesting in a lot of regards. Well, so there was a lot of activity going on. So let's think about it. So we had some really big fine art drops. X copy. I mean, like we're talking in the millions, but POC did something that generated almost $100 million just in the fourth quarter. Now, like those seem like rounding error to his 11 billion, but there was a lot of transaction data going on. It did get hot again. Fine art picked up again, particularly late November into December. And then we had some other big things like ConeX, which we'll talk about a little bit later, came out. So there were things that were minting the December 26th. So it didn't feel like that. I agree. But there was still plenty of activity. And we started to see Adidas, a lot of the brand things came in. And some of the blue chips started to pump towards the end of December as well, which we saw was really the driver into January.
Yeah. That all checks out. Makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, so we had some other things, I think that are highly relevant around the data. So we talk about this idea of the 25 billion for the year. You're going to see different numbers. So that's what we should point out to people. If you look at the folks from CryptoSlam, they only look at Ethereum, for example, and they came out a little over 15 billion for Ethereum. And so that's interesting because that would be about 60% of all NFT sales were on Ethereum. I'm surprised that there would be 40% off of Ethereum, but that's essentially what they're looking at. There was another number that was about 18 billion. But this is the DApp Radar numbers, and I think those seem to be pretty reasonable based on just looking at OpenSea data for each quarter, and trying to extrapolate from there.
I wonder if that includes, because doesn't Nifty Gateway, aren't you on? I wonder if there's Ethereum NFTs that are purchased but don't necessarily get gathered in that 60%. Anyway,
That could be.
Thought.
That could be.
But it's still interesting.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And I should just clarify too. I think it was Crypto Slam said it was about 19 billion total market, and it was nonfungible.com that just does Ethereum, and that was 15 billion. But it's a big market, obviously. And and I thought this would provide a really good opportunity to talk about something else, which in the NFT space, but that's real estate. And so the estimate from a couple of different folks right now is that there was about $500 million of the 25 billion that was done in real estate, metaverse real estate last year. So I guess my first question for you is, does that surprise you? And if does, high or low?
This feels right based on that bigger number, because I noticed last year when I was getting land early in Sandbox and Decentraland, those prices were pretty even throughout the year. Even in the mix of the JPEG summer stuff, the land stuff was staying pretty steady. I mean, climbing a little bit, but not like anything else we were seeing. And then Facebook made the Meta announcement, and that seemed to bring folks out of the woodwork in terms of investors and everyone else taking an interest, and that spiked the price of both those SAN, the token, and all the non-fungible land. So I think when we look at 2021 data or 2022 data, that number is going to be huge compared to what we're seeing now. But that feels right. As the NFT stuff was happening, I was sort of like, why isn't land happening yet? Anyway.
Yeah, well, it seems like the next logical place. So if the 25 billion number is correct, we'll call it 2% of all NFT sales were land, some sort of metaverse land. I have trouble believing that is going to grow significantly as a proportion of the NFT space. And the reason I think that is scarcity. Not that metaverse land is that scarce. Some of the metaverses actually have scarcity built in. Some of them do not. You've got the big four in there, which had most of the land purchases. So that's going to be Sandbox, Decentraland, Crypto Voxels, and Somnium. There are other places like Treeverse should probably get some nice pump this year. Not financial advice, just saying observationally it would probably make sense. Although they have a different type of land ownership there. So it's not quite the same and then we're going to see a lot more come online, but it's so much bigger of an effort to actually create a metaverse and sell land than it is to create an NFT project of any type. So I just have trouble believing that could even reach like 10%, unless maybe the NFT market outside of land just stalled out or contracted.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll see a jump. I think I mostly agree with you. I think we'll see a jump when we see all the catch up that happened this later part of 2021, and it might be closer to like 10% of what's happening now. But I'm kind of inclined to agree with you. I don't necessarily think it's going to keep growing until but there's still so many unknowns, right? And what counts as a metaverse? If someone comes out with a killer game that's actually fun to play, and it has a metaverse component or some notion of land ownership, will we count that as it seems like there's some abstraction.
If it's an NFT and it's land sales, then it would, I think it would have to be in that category. So, okay, we'll see. I mean, I think the other thing about it is we did see the big pump in land prices in the fourth quarter. They were already expensive compared to NFTs. So compared to like a lot of the art NFTs or the community-based PFP project NFTs, because and what that does is that keeps a lot of the low dollar investors out by necessity, and decreases the velocity of turnover. And so when
Yeah.
we think about those sales, you have to understand is like some of that is new land, some of that is just land that's being resold, and a lot of that NFT
Sure.
numbers is net new in 2021. But if we look at the numbers for January of this year, which were huge, it's just recirculating stuff that already exists.
That makes sense.
So velocity of money. We
mean,
should talk about that more.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think there's so many unknowns with the metaverse stuff of what it even means. Like no one has a clear definition yet that I've heard that's satisfactory. So I don't know if we're waiting for this like definitive metaverse experience and then we'll see who the winner is, or if it's always going to be a collection of small places. Yeah,
I have trouble believing there's going to be one winner. And I think we do know that there's the gaming application that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's the event application, which happening. And then there's this other thing. So Portion made some news just a couple weeks ago, maybe it was last week, over $1 million for a plot in Decentraland, and not a particularly large plot. And ultimately, they're like they want to be a Web3 auction house. So they bought a spot right next to I don't know what you call it. What's the central location in Decentraland?
Yeah, like a hub.
It's the main, whatever the main plaza that is. It's it's right off the main plaza. So so it's like highly valuable space. It's not a tiny space. They got quite a bit of space together, but I just think like people are going to try to figure it out. I will say that there's not a lot to do in the metaverses that exist today, unless you consider like Fortnite a metaverse, which sort of is, but not quite. Roblox, Minecraft, those are all building game type things. But I mean, there's nothing to do in Decentraland.
Yeah. There's use cases, but they're not. Yeah,
they're not at scale. They're not at scale.
Exactly.
They're not. There's not frequency. Crypto voxels, right? There's a use case. Like people have done art shows that draw in dozens of people, right? Infrequently. Sandbox, you see people wandering around. I mean, they did have the alpha thing, which people were playing the game. So there's not a lot to do there. So I think 2022 is a year of becoming. And then we'll see if the becoming turns into adoption, and we'll see if adoption turns into retention. But we're just not seeing all that much activity. Everything right now is prospective, building a game before people come, buying a land, assuming people will come, and then just assuming that people are going to then spend a lot of time in a digital space. And it seems like they might, and it seems appealing to me. It's more appealing than people's like spending time on Facebook. And I think it could really kill Instagram if they figure out a way that people can sort of flip through it and just drop in and just see things really quickly. But because it's a more immersive experience and requires more attention, it's going to take a behavior change. So there might be challenges there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because I can see, especially having actually dabbled in these and built some stuff on properties, I can see Sandbox finding an audience because it has kind of a clear purpose. In most cases, you design experiences on there, so you don't just stand around and look at things and wonder what you're supposed to do. Not to say that's bad. I think novelty is important to get people interested until you find the thing. But so I think Sandbox has a chance to resonate with a kind of gaming audience. The question will be if that's scalable to a different sort of audience, or if it will become a hardcore Roblox. You have that whole thing with games, right? Where it goes, if it gets massively popular, it skews to a younger and younger audience. And then anyone over a certain age doesn't want anything to do with it anymore. So whether that happens to some of these will be interesting. I also think having worked in VR and seen this, VR has tried several false starts now to become a thing. Like and don't get me wrong, I think the Quest 2 is a great device that does a good job of creating a VR experience. But this notion that people are going to spend a lot of time there hasn't happened yet. I think that at some point, the metaverse stuff and the VR things are going to converge and create an experience where that happens. But I don't necessarily know it's going to happen, or think it's going to happen very soon. And I also, to your point, it's a totally different experience. Like you don't put on goggles while you're watching the television passively to gaze. It takes effort and focus. And
well, and we just talked about the big four, and only one of those is
Mhm.
actually an immersive VR experience.
Yeah, Somnium, right? Yeah.
The other three are, are 3D simulated spaces. They're not.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they're all 3D.
And that's another
spaces
fantastic
on a
point
2D.
too, is figuring out which of these will win based just strictly on barrier to entry. It's one thing that I think crypto voxels has done really well. The fact that I can copy and paste my parcel URL to anyone and they can
Yes.
see it even on a mobile device without having a wallet is a neat. I could see things like that being used as lots of random utility. Like, hey, let's have a quick meeting in here. They've actually recently added the ability to have like hosted like artificial spaces for a short time. So even if you don't own land, you can still go into space with some people. So I think, to your point earlier, like I don't necessarily know that there'll be one winner, and I think we'll see a difference between each of these.
I think there's just
super cool.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
It is cool. Yeah, and I think there will be a lot of spaces. It doesn't seem to me like it's going to be winner take all yet.
Yeah.
It might eventually be winner take all, but I'm not sure. Even in the social media space, we didn't have one winner. Like everyone thinks there's one winner. There's multiple winners, right? And so this strikes
different ones
me as more like that.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm excited though. That stuff gets me. I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like there's something there, and someone's going to find it, and it's I don't know. It's exciting.
It is very exciting. It's going to be a fun process of discovering. So I think that's easy to look forward to. Okay, let's move on to projects. That's market data for the week. It feels like we're going to be doing that at the top of the hour every week. And this might be market data as well, but we'll call this the project segment. And we just want to talk about Bored Ape Yacht Club. We've talked about them a few times in the past. I think every third or fourth twin we have a segment on them, and mostly because they do a lot. Or maybe even more often because they show up in brands and NFT Lands segment very often. But this is a really interesting thing. So Andreesen, Horowitz, and talks to invest in Bored Ape Yacht Club. What's not in this headline, which all the subsequent headlines put in, was that they're looking at a valuation of $5 billion. Now, I've seen other things subsequently. There were $4 billion. Shout out to NFT Nick, who actually had this before Axios and on his YouTube show a couple weeks ahead that they were in talks, and they were talking about sort of the billions figure. But I don't know what you think about this in terms of that. I had a number of Twitter conversations with a group of people that we both mutually know, and like saying, "Oh, is this a reasonable valuation, or are we at peak bubble here?" What are your thoughts?
I think it's reasonable based on what we know about NFTs in the space right now. I think it's reasonable under those. We know we're in some sort of, maybe I shouldn't say this. I don't think we all know. I believe we're in some kind of bubble. I also believe that NFTs are still inevitable and going to become a thing. But I think a lot of stuff is going to take a hit at some point. I think that this makes sense because Andreesen Horowitz wants to be involved. And so why not go after the biggest thing? And that feels right. The thing that I get weird about here is like, just this, like, what, wasn't the whole point of this that people contribute to the project and we all benefit? And
oh yes,
like, what does it mean? What's this mean for the future of the project? And I don't want to speculate too much, but Andreesen Horowitz does this investment, like at some point do the IP rights stuff start to change a little bit? I know they can't do much with that because they've already given it away, but it just makes me wonder about
let's split it. Let's split the conversation.
Yeah.
So the first part of the conversation is $5 billion reasonable?
I don't know. My gut says yes, but I haven't even done any math on that, and I know that you think more that way.
I've done some math.
Really want to hear. I want to hear. Yeah, I want to hear this.
Well, so first of all, I think we could just take we can step back and just say this is an important new space, and is it reasonable that is this the leading brand in NFTs? Is this like the leader?
I think
certainly one of the top three.
Yes, I think in terms of recognizability, recognition, whatever the word is, people are starting to say, oh, like those apes when you mention NFTs. So I think from an awareness perspective, it is.
Yeah. So the idea that like the top brand in NFTs could be worth billions of dollars seems reasonable to me. It's a large enough market. We've already said that it's 25 billion just in transactions. And so there's latent asset value that exceeds that. Okay, so that's one way I would think about it. The other is I just look at their cash flows. They're doing about 5 million a week in secondary transaction volume. That's 20 million a month. Call that 250 million for the year. So 5 billion would be 20 times just the proceeds on their secondary transactions. Now that's a forward 25. It's still high in terms of valuations you'd see even at this stage, but we're starting to get in the realm of possibility for something that has a lot of growth potential. They certainly have all these collabs that can bring in value as well. Licensing deals. They have the game. They're about to launch a cryptocurrency, which keeps being mentioned but not released. Although they have commented on that, saying they want to do it right. So, if I start looking at that and I say, okay, if they have these other assets, maybe actually when you look at all the other things, it's like a 12 forward revenue, which is definitely reasonable.
I think that it's funny. Yeah, that all I think makes a lot of sense. I'll save my comment till I know we break to the next section. I'll keep us on track and focused.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So, so the one thing I will point out too is when you do valuation, what like a lot of the reporters like to do is they like just to look at the floor price and multiply that by the collection size. And I've seen this where they just do it by Bored Ape, and they're like, oh, $2.6 billion. And they're like, oh, what about the dogs? What about the mutants? You would do that. But then I would say that doesn't matter because they don't own those. They might own a few of those apes. Yeah. But those assets are held by other people. So that's not actually their asset value. They just have some influence over that. And what they actually get is the residual secondary transaction fees, secondary sale transaction fees. So even though I saw people making the mistake where they are undervaluing the total amount of holdings because they've somehow, like most people don't know that there's dogs and apes or mutants. And even if people know mutants, they don't know there's dogs, right? They certainly didn't know there was a coin. So I think about the assets they hold, which are not apes. They've got some of those because they've got land, for example, in some of these metaverses. They've got the cash flows today. They've got licensing deals that they've already started. They've got some coming up, and they've got the coin coming out. And the coin alone, you would think, would have a significant potential boost. But the second part of the question then is this a good thing if their current valuation today is $5 billion or $4 billion, which I think is probably more likely, and they take in 200 million from Andreesen Horowitz, who then owns 5%.
Yeah. And that's the part that I don't, there's a portion of me that wants to like, hey, what was all that decentralization talk that everyone sort of embodies and embraces when it's convenient, and then like, oh well, On the other hand, I think that a VC could actually provide tremendous value to them because they have a network of connected folks and understand how you might productize that brand in different ways. And that's interesting. I think that they could, I think a VC could, in more, maybe a better way to say this, I think a VC could help define some real solid utility around Bored Apes that could aid the project.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. So it's, when you look at it, like if it's 200 million, it's 5% ownership. I mean, it's not that significant. They just want a seat at the table. If they were taking a 40% stake or more, I might think about it differently. But you started bringing up this VC thing, and is this a good idea? I wish I'd had the tweet from Jack Dorsey, because he basically over the past week has been talking about the idea that VCs are basically going to own Web3. We can already see it. He said it's basically inevitable. Get over it. I will say that it seems like he's sort of lamenting that fact, but it's not popular when he says that online, because that's not what people want to hear. I think it's kind of refreshing honesty. We look at what the VCs are doing. Last week we talked about Pixel Vault, right?
Yeah,
$100 million they just took in. I bet they got more than 10% ownership in that company for $100 million. I don't think that's $1 billion pre-money valuation.
Yeah. There's a lot of cognitive bias going on in terms of like everyone conveniently believing whatever benefits their wallet.
Exactly. Coinbase NFT marketplace. That's going to be amazing. We want the retail investor, retail collector to come on in, and they only care about that because they think it's going to pump their bag.
I mean,
do you want more competition for the fresh mints of really quality projects? Probably not. But do you want more people out there willing to take your bad NFTs out of your bag for you? Absolutely.
I think this is a double-edged sword. Like, I think I don't want to sound like VCs are evil or something like that, but you're giving interest to another entity that's fiscally motivated. Like, that's going to affect what you want to do. And it might be good and it might not. I think that the one good thing I'll say is I think even if Dorsey's right and everyone and all the VCs get in and they own Web3, there is still way more agency in the hand of token holders and creators than there were in Web2.
Yes.
So you could still do an independent project in this environment and be okay.
Well, you can do a couple things, which is different.
Yeah.
One, like in Web 2, you could just leave the platform if you didn't like what was going on. That's about all you could do. So they have fewer users, and that's an important metric to them. In this case, you can not only leave, but you can sell your asset. And if enough people do that, it's going to drive the asset value down. They'll get a short hit in secondary transaction fees, royalties. But after that, they're going to look at a much smaller stream, which will radically decrease the valuation of the business. So you do have a much bigger lever.
True. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like there's also going to be like just regulatory nightmares. If you had a bunch of Bored Ape owners that don't like what's happening because a VC comes in and starts making changes, and they collectively make a decision to like sell simultaneously on the same day, what's that mean from a legal perspective? What's that mean for the project? Like, it's like these stories you hear about, the Starbucks employees unionizing, and there's a lot more power in the hands of the token holders, I think, than, So that's a good thing, I think, for the most part. But there's no difference between, I don't think, those people that, individuals who are saying they're in it for decentralization and for the little guy. Lots of people say that until they become a big guy, and then they change their tune, right?
No, a lot of them keep saying it, but they just don't believe it. When they were a little guy, they really believed it. When they become a big guy, their commitment goes down. Okay, so we have another thing.
Yeah.
So Bored Ape, like we're just going to go deep on this. Buzzfeed, which is doing so well. This is a company that's, I think, worth like a sixth of when it went public, or its last valuation round, I should say. They're out there and they just decided that they were going to dox the founders of Bored Ape. Now, Bored Ape already had a CEO that was known, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but she's not one of the original two primary founders. She's not one of the two primary devs who all were anonymous. Obviously everybody knows that these apes go for a lot of money. And then we just started seeing headlines that it's worth the valuation of the enterprise might be $5 billion. And all of a sudden, someone at Buzzfeed said, oh, and now no, they're not the only one who was interested in the story.
Yeah.
But someone just said, oh, let's find out who these people are. They're rich.
Yeah.
People have a right to know, or more likely, people will want to know, and that'll drive a lot of clicks because that is our business.
Yeah, I lean towards that second analysis. It just feels bad. I don't like it. I see how someone could make from a journalism perspective, someone could make a case for why this information is important to share. But I don't see it. And you have to, in my situation, like fairly or not, I'm judging them based on what BuzzFeed has done up to now, which is demonstrate a desire to get me to click on stuff that is absolute garbage and has no value to me. And
the sugar of information, right? Empty calories of your day. It comes from places like BuzzFeed. So I think it does point to like this bigger issue, though, or this not issue, this bigger question about anonymity and pseudonymity in blockchain, and then as it extends to NFTs. When it was, it's funny, when it was just money, people seem to be okay with it. When it's money plus other things, culture and those types of things, I see people not happy about it. Now we did start having this movement. I think it started like sometime in September, certainly was strong by October, November, that we need to be wary of the anonymous founders in NFT projects. And so some people decided they weren't going to do that anymore. Most of which I found later, you'd hear them pumping some project where they were anonymous founders because every rule deserves an exception if they think that it'll pump really well. But is this something that's like important? You own a Bored Ape. We both have mutants. I didn't care that I didn't know who those folks were because they had such a good track record, and I actually knew that other people knew who they were.
Yeah, I think that's just it. The track record was good. And we're doing all this in real time, right? Like it took a few rug pulls for people to realize that self-doxing was a marketing angle or good or whether the intentions are good or bad. Like saying who you are had some benefits at some point and still does, I think, for the most part. I don't care who they are. Now I get it. If like we found out one of these people was doing something terrible and by exposing their name, we might want to, if it was the dude, the pharma bro guy that bought the Wu-Tang album, I forget his name.
Martin Shkreli.
That was behind Bored Apes. Yeah, that might be something too. Also, I want to make sure that wasn't taken out of context. I'm not suggesting that that's the case at all in case anyone's watching this. I'm just saying if someone was involved that was shady and you were exposing that. But this, I don't.
Well, I mean, we've seen that. We talked about it. Was it last week or the week before about Beanie, who someone doxed him or revealed who he was, and yeah, he was very involved in Pixel Vault, and then Pixel Vault immediately got rid of him. He was out of it, but like he had apparently, I don't know if it was accusations or a record associated with fraud. So it's just a really bad look, and also at a time when they're raising money.
Yeah.
So they want to. So that happened. There was more of a social uproar over the past few days around one of the founders of the ENS Domains company, where they didn't like something he tweeted a few years ago. So the DAO voted and got rid of him. So he's still actually the single largest holder of ENS tokens, I think. But still might have some. But like, so that's like a different type of thing. So he was known, like people know who he was. I will say that our friends at Bored Ape, Gargamel and Gordon Garner, we'll continue to go by their by their pseudonyms. They handled it with a great deal of class, and they showed the Web 2 versus the Web 3 version of them, which I thought was fun. And then not long after, the two developers on the team did the exact same thing. So I thought that was pretty awesome that they did that. And people knew who they were, because a lot of people met them in New York. They were there. Gotcha. They were at the ApeFest things. Yeah. And so it wasn't like they were totally unknown. It just they weren't really known by the people who aren't in the industry or aren't paying close attention because they live in Web 2, Web 1, pre-web world.
Yeah. I thought that was cool how they did that. I don't know. It's, again, we're learning so much as it goes about what's, the ledger is transparent to everyone. Doesn't mean who owns that wallet, but I think over time, as we start to see, people posting on Twitter and things like that, and we associate apes with faces, it's all going to come out in the wash. But it's back to that thing of who's doing the action and what's their intention behind it. And that's the thing about this that feels kind of bad.
I agree with that. It's hard to ever have much sympathy for the journalists. And I write, I publish, but I just think like their incentive structure is not based on things that most people, really would focus on in terms of like, being a good neighbor, that type of thing. But okay, I'm okay with pseudonym. Here's the thing that is bad about, and I won't say that this was true about the exact journalist who wrote this story, but there was this big thing back in the Arab Spring. People might remember that, about the anonymous nature of Twitter handles, or the pseudonymous nature of Twitter handles, and how that was so important for people around the world that were taking a risk, and they were up against forces much more powerful to them that might kill them, might make their life difficult, all sorts of different things. And it was very interesting when Clubhouse came around last year. Well, I guess 2 years ago now, but it was really last year it came up, because they had a real world identity requirement, but they pretty quickly relaxed that as the app was growing, because they're like, oh, they face this problem. Like, some people, it's really a safety issue for them, and you want their voices to be, otherwise like their voices are never heard. So is Web3 that space? And I think that most people, journalists, say, well, Web3 is about money or has money associated with it, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, and that's, okay. Like, if you're a journalist, I think like you could do some work and figure out that that's not necessarily always the case. But
well, I don't know. I think,
I guess we're all, I don't know. Everyone's motivated by something, I guess. So
yeah, they're motivated by like their next job, their current job, their next job. They get paid too, right?
Sure.
They're motivated by prestige. They're the ones that break the story, right? And this wasn't that difficult of a story to break. She looked at who the names were associated with the Delaware incorporation filing for Yuga Labs. And from there, it was just a matter of finding the names, lining them up with social media handles, lining them up with their apes, and from there. And then they called up, and the CEO of Yuga Labs said, "Yeah, you're correct. Those are the people." Right? They didn't try to. They weren't evasive about it. They just said, "Yes, this is the case." But I think it's kind of sad. I hope there's a space for people to not have to always just be themselves, like they are in the real world. But maybe that's bad. I mean, certainly Mark Zuckerberg thinks it's bad. Maybe anybody who's opposed to anonymity is on the side of Mark Zuckerberg. Maybe I'll just say that.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about all this space is that you could use it in different ways. So it could be used for that. I mean, marijuana or sex workers, like these are two topics that laws change state to state, right? Like this is groups of people involved in those industries who could benefit from a place to share their experiences and or seek organize to try and change legislation to benefit there. Like it doesn't always have to be nefarious reasons for getting together, right? There could be like a way where those people can safely see what they can do about what they want to do. And obviously that can be used for terrible things too, but that's, I don't know, it's the nature of like how much freedom should people have or not. And it's hard to.
Tough. I think we're headed towards just full identity. Maybe a few things that you'll be able to get away with it. I suspect that a lot of people are going to have both an IRL identity and a secondary identity that they try to remain somewhat anonymous for some of these things. We'll see. I think we already went through this. The answer became very clear in the Web 1 world that all the spaces of anonymity shrunk. There's only a couple left really. And Web 2 would like to impose its view on Web 3, and maybe that's the right view. I won't, because
there's one actually. I have one thought on that's interesting. Part of the Web 2 thing, I think, is that identity created credibility or accountability in some cases.
Accountability.
Now, I know that other corporations might want that because they want to benefit from that information. But in a Web 3 world where we talked about this before, the idea of an app that might take photos and then mint them on the spot and verify that you actually were in a place at a point in time taking that photo. And that has a certain level of journalistic integrity, let's say. If the contract is structured in a way where everyone agrees that it's legit and can't be hacked, in a situation like that, where the wallet or the blockchain itself is able to authenticate the content being posted from that wallet or gathered by that wallet, then the notion of identity as a source of credibility goes away. So I think there are still applications where you want anonymity, but you can still prove that things that wallet were doing are authentic in ways that we can't even conceive yet.
Well, I think that this is the whole idea of blockchain and trustless systems or trustless interactions. And so you're right. This is different than Web 2 in that way in particular. I think the accountability thing is a different thing. I think there are still ways to create some accountability around or in Web 3 with anonymity that were not available in Web 2. But it doesn't enable you necessarily just to go to one place and pressure them to bend to your will to create the accountability for someone in particular. You have to really persuade a lot of people, and we'll see. I mean, persuasion isn't something most people want to spend the time on because there's a lot of effort and sometimes you fail. They would rather strong arm people, but we'll see. Let's move on. I think we should go. We should go on to, we're just going to hit this really quick, but I thought it would be cool to talk about hacks. everyone watch out for Mars Stealer. Mars Stealer, I think, is really interesting because it, well, first of all, it basically does an exploit with your browsers and your browser-based wallets and drains your wallets, steal all your NFTs. This thing is available on the dark web, I think, for hackers for like $175. So this is a social engineering type of thing that people are going to try to plant. And there's a couple other things that are really interesting about it. It's very clever. The first is if your default language on your PC, your computer that you're using, it has any of the languages of the former USSR countries is its default, it actually exits the computer and does not return, doesn't leave any trace that it was there. So basically, I mean, so Russian, obviously, but then there's like all like Kazakh, Armenian, I think, probably Belarusian. I don't know what the dialect version of that is, Ukrainian. So it basically does it's like a safe haven. It doesn't go after that. For whatever reason, you can speculate it all you want. But then the other thing it does is it actually does the processing intermittently at like really low bandwidth. So it's harder to detect with existing systems. And it removes files that show its activity on the computer. So anybody, if you just like, now, first of all, you look in your wallet, it's very oftentimes you look in there and like, oh, something's missing. And that's usually just some functionality in the wallet's not firing properly. It's like, it makes it look like your NFT is not there. Or sometimes makes it look like you hold an NFT that you sold 6 months ago. But if you have seen a bunch of things like leaving your wallet really quickly, you need to be in a race to get things out of your wallet because it could be Mars Stealer and they're going to drain it, and they won't drain it all at once. They're just going to cherry pick things initially that are high value, and then they'll start taking all of it away.
So remind everyone again how you get this on your system.
How do you get this on your system? There's a number of different ways, but it tends to be going to a link for a website that then when you click through on one of the links on the website, it actually does a download.
Loads. Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm guessing. I don't know if it's a SQL injection. They didn't have that. Like, I should look at this. I will look at this because I should look at a cybersecurity blog to see what they say about it. I was looking at the more mainstream folks who are talking about it who don't understand cyber, but yes, it's usually a nefarious link that you go to. You do something because you're trying to participate in a NFT project, and what they do is they plant something on your system.
Got it. Yeah.
So, oh, by the way, this is the listing that you can go to on the dark web to buy the Mars Stealer if you want to be the hacker who implements this. And so the idea is it's not just one organization doing this. It's like thousands of hackers now have this tooling to do this. And so it's mostly a social engineering type of thing once they get it installed. Another thing, we have the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. I don't know if anyone actually fell for this, but a lot of people were getting these notes that they wanted to use their Bored Ape at the Super Bowl. And please respond with your security phrase. Like, what is your security phrase? Is that your seed phrase? Yeah, the NFL is calling. They want your seed phrase. What should your answer be?
No, always no. Come on. We should know this. If you have a Bored Ape, you should definitely know this.
I would hope that the Bored Ape, although there's a lot of celebrities now who hold Bored Apes, so this probably isn't true. But people who own Bored Apes are probably slightly more sophisticated than this. They might be better off going to some of the other collections where there's more civilians who have ownership. Okay, and Richard.Eths, he's a good follow, Richard, on Twitter, did a tweet thread on hacks and securing your NFTs. Really interesting thing that's highlighted there. I'll read it. In all observed hacks, there is a moment where a seed phrase was entered into a computer or a malicious transaction has been signed. And I believe actually with Mars Stealer, it's actually capturing it while you're entering. Well, you have to re-enter something onto your into the browser, and it's capturing that. But just there you go. This is like really good advice for anybody who's thinking about these types of things. If something is asking for your seed phrase, there are times when you have to enter your seed phrase. Although it's best not to type it. Like, could you copy and paste it if you or you could use your cold storage wallet. There's lots of things you can do, but you should absolutely be on high alert when you're doing that. And then the other thing is you should be on high alert anytime you're signing something. And that can be the hardest time because we sign so many things with our wallet just to get access to things. That's a time when most people let their guard down and they have these problems where, oh, my mutant is suddenly gone. Anything else?
Yeah. I mean, the seed phrase is the one that's there is no circumstance under which you should give that to anyone ever, or share your screen when you're entering it.
Well, you do. Yeah, that's also true. But you do sometimes have to enter it. Let's say
yes, if you get a new computer,
in the browser. Yeah, you got a new computer. Yes. If you want to use multiple browsers with the same wallet, you're going to have to.
Yes,
that's the only way to do it. But there are some things you can do.
But I mean, another
copy and paste is a good one.
Yes, another thing that people do that I've heard is a horror story is you get your seed phrase and you're not supposed to give it to anyone. So you want to put it in a place you'll never forget it. So you email it to yourself. Like that's bad because that can be found. So in general, like the safest way, cold storage wallet, but also like when you see that seed phrase for the first time, physically writing it down on something and then putting that someplace where it is totally safe and you will not lose it. I know there's encryption sites that where you can type it in, you can copy it and put it into a computer and it's encrypted and it feels safe, but it's still on a computer. So grain of salt, like
there you go. Okay, we're going to just hit very quickly brands and NFT lands. We do this every week. I thought this was fascinating. Manchester United, one of the top sports brands in the world. It's certainly in the top 5 most valuable sports brands. They're on Tezos.
Interesting.
I think it is. And, Tezos is making hay with a sustainability argument. That's largely their focus when they pitch these types of things. Now, we see them at like Art Basel and some other places where they talk about how they're very art friendly and artist friendly, which is absolutely true. They actually have a mission around that, and some of the best and earliest NFT art came out on Tezos blockchain. But I thought this was really interesting that a brand like Man U was doing it, and when they go, is that going to lead a lot of other brands like sports brands or other type of brands to say, "Oh, we should do this"? So, like Nike bought Artifact, like Adidas has into the metaverse on Ethereum. Why wouldn't they have something else on Tezos now that Man U is there?
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, when I see stuff like this, it makes me, someone thought hard about this, right? This was not like a haphazard decision. So to your point, it gives credibility to that, to Tezos, not that it necessarily needed it, but it gives it another level of credibility. And it makes me wonder, like from a utility perspective, what sort of things are they thinking about that might be necessitated by this particular chain?
Let me give you a perspective here. So I was just looking at CoinMarketCap, size of them. I believe I think the Sandbox is just slightly smaller than Tezos is in terms of total coins in circulation or value of coins in circulation. And Decentraland is actually larger. So, we think of Tezos being a layer 1, like really important, right? but actually they're in this position where they could really use that boost, going from the high 30s to low 40s in terms of the market cap for any cryptocurrency, to get up into the top 20 is a big deal. That's like, there's a very steep curve when you get to that point. So I'm really going to watch this, because if we see after Man U using that as like a lever to get more people on Tezos, that could really shake things up, and and give Solana and Ethereum a little more competition than they have today.
Yeah, and Tezos is well priced. Like, that's just something that I'm sure a lot of people would be looking at and wanting to get into. And the other thing I like about Tezos, like even on Coinbase, they give like a 4.3% APY just for holding it. So it seems like it's ripe for folks to, especially as this gets more widespread, this feels like something that would draw a lot of people new to crypto in, that if they have a Coinbase account and the team they like is wearing Tezos shirts, it seems like, they could pull a lot of folks that way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important. Okay, so one more story, brands and NFT Lands, but we're really just going to hit it very quickly. I just thought it was interesting, and that is that Alfa Romeo, one of the brands under Stellantis, so now Chrysler, like these giant auto brands, they have an NFT for their automobiles now. And I thought what was interesting is they're going to record somewhere. It wasn't clear to me where this was going to get recorded, based on the NFT, all of the history of that car. So I think it's going to start with the provenance of the car, where it was manufactured, every time that it's like had maintenance. And so there's going to be an NFT which represents the useful life of the car, I guess. So I thought that was just sort of interesting.
Yeah, that's a cool application, I think. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think there's that's cool. I dig it.
Okay. What's in your bag? We'll just do this. I'm just gonna talk very quickly about a couple of things.
Yeah.
This is Gemma, and let me see. So this is Tristan Eaton. So he's a pretty well-known Los Angeles, I'd call him pop artist. This looks like pop art to me. And Gemma stands for, what is it? Something Metaverse. I can't remember what it's called, but I think it's really interesting. I like it because I like the styling, and he did the most amazing marketing stunts where he would put these gemmas on. He created cereal boxes that were Gemma cereal boxes, and he would place them. Do you know this? He'd place them in the supermarkets.
No,
and then he would basically just tweet something, or no, it was on Instagram. He'd put something up, and he'd like some cryptic image, like he'd take a picture somewhere where it was. Then people had to figure out where it was, and they would run in and everything. So it was really cool. But he's doing much, like, it looks kind of traditional in that, every quarter people are going to have an opportunity to burn it and get a physical copy. There's a couple other things where, holders are going to have a chance of getting the original, which is priced at $45,000. The original that all the collection is based on. It's like a $45,000 thing that's going to go to one Gemma holder. What I really like about this, this is a generative piece. It's a traditional artist, and not just doing a generative edition piece, basically. Just trying to put a little bit more community and some interesting things associated with it.
Yeah, I dig that. I heard about this project through you. I love the art. I think it's really cool. I think same thing. Like, pardon me. One of my criteria for picking new stuff is if it was an established artist before they did the project. That's always appealing to me. And so this was cool. The cereal box thing I love. But the whole notion that you could do the thing of burning one to get a physical print, I thought is such a neat, it sort of calls into question the whole thing of like, what's the whole argument of right click and save, and does a JPEG have value? Like, you're making a decision now to, if you think that that's not the case, you got to put your money where your mouth is and burn the JPEG to get the physical thing. It just creates a neat argument or context for which you might want more.
Well, and I have this feeling too that very few people are going to burn. And so if that's the case, then there's going to be very few physical prints, which might make the physical prints more valuable, which might cause some people to burn. And he's going to have windows 4 times a year when you can do this. So you can't always do it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really fascinating. We'll go to the another thing in my bag that I bought in the last, call it 30 days. This is Anthony Hurd, also successful artist, pre-NFT. This one I think is interesting. I'd like to point that out. So first of all, it's my eyes. And the theory is, or the theme behind it is, that in our current age, we are just these giant eyeballs, and that we can't get enough of visual content. So that's where the flame comes from and everything. So I think that's a really cool. But this is a collection of 150, but it's not a generative collection. They're all one of ones, but basically he just took a file. And so this looks like a PFP generative collection, but it's not. These are all hand done by him. And there's some pieces he reuses, but for the most part, they're all completely unique. So I thought it was a really interesting collection.
Yeah, I got one of these as well, because I think you posted about both of these in the same time on the maybe it was the Mystics server.
Man, I'm an influencer.
Yeah, I know it. I liked these. I love the small collections. I like that some of these are happening. Sisters did this. There was 2,000 of those, but this was especially small, and it's like you said, each one's unique. The other project, Ghosts, I want to say it's called, spelled with the V in it somewhere. They do all original stuff. It's all, every drawing is done individually. It's just a neat, I dig it. I think it's cool. And it,
you can see the artist's hand, right? You know, like, and I like that. And it was actually like when we were putting together the Neftorian PFP collection, we talked about doing that, and ultimately we wanted more flexibility, but we actually were really specific about how it has to look, and that we want to see the artist's hand and like all the different pieces, as opposed to something that just looks like copy and paste from Illustrator.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's neat things about, everything I've seen of the Neftoria stuff looks fantastic. I'm really excited to see some of the variations that come up there, but the PFP stuff is great. There's some of that I love too. And I think you can still totally do original and intriguing things, but it's neat when an artist has this much ideation around a theme and explores it, each one. I don't know. I just dig it. Variety's good. I like it.
Absolutely. Okay. And we have one more to talk about. This is in your bag.
Yes.
What are we looking at here?
Yeah, this is a ConeX, which is obviously Nike owns this now, and I always bag on brands. So here I am buying one of these. What got me on this was a couple things. I looked at the space pod, and I actually went and walked through one of those, and I thought it was so slick that it triggered my Metaverse envy, and I wanted that. I also talked to 2 other people who I respect who were collecting this and super excited about it. So I thought, okay, I'll look more closely. And it reminded me of a project of my own that I've been working on. And I don't know. I thought it was interesting and I should get in on it. So yes, I picked this up, and then a space pod, and I was able to get in before they dropped the monolith artifact and the loot pod artifact, or space, Metaverse space. I kind of like these.
So you got in because you want to be part of it, but you did it in time to get the freebies. Yes. Isn't that a lesson for all of you people out there building an NFT project? You can increase the value of the things you've already sold by giving people free stuff. It's amazing.
Yes. Caveat to that. I think everyone's going to be doing that at some point. The free stuff,
Oh,
the
I've got so
additional
much
stuff
free
has to
stuff.
make the whole better, right? Like
Exactly.
if you're just diluting what I liked about this was the free thing, this sort of loot pod that connects to the space pod, or looks very similar. It just sounds and looks like a place to display all the loot I get in this metaverse. And then the other monolith thing, it just feels like I'm going to be getting neat stuff. And now that I have the notion of an avatar and a space for that avatar, whether it's successful or not, in my mind, I can start to tell a story about what sorts of utility might exist there.
Yeah.
It's on them to pull it off, but it gives me more to hang on than another NFT project that just gives me stuff that doesn't seem related or connected.
Well,
to
I'll give you the counter argument. I don't feel like I'm talking them down. But I would have felt better about the future of Artifact's metaverse if they were not owned by a global brand, a big corporation, and what they're going to do, what their tolerance is going to be, what their investment horizon is going to be, particularly a apparel company who's not really in the entertainment space. I mean, like, I think maybe they think they are, but they're certainly in the culture space. So I would be more enthusiastic about this if they had Andreesen Horowitz or Animoca Brands behind them, because then I would know exactly what's going to happen, and they wouldn't have the friction associated with having a big corporation do an unnatural act. But you have some really talented artists. You've got really good vision there. They've got capital now, so maybe it'll work out.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think I'm excited about it because it looks, in terms from a quality perspective, the stuff they're doing just looks fantastic, and it looks like there's a lot of thought put into it. But I know that the experience is, like, already in this loot pod, there's a Nike swoosh on the wall. And this monolith box has a Nike symbol on the side, and it's like, okay, so does this open and do sneakers come out? Like, I know that they're pushing their brand, but I also know that they're probably going to demonstrate some of the breakthrough stuff that's going to be good.
All right, we'll see. We'll see if they get the funding. We'll see. All right, Scott. I think that's going to wrap it up for another week of the TWINN. It's our 27th episode. We've done a lot of these. I've got a great artist interview coming up next week too, probably before our next TWINN. So that'll be fun to do. People should follow you on Twitter at Scott Leach. Well, what else should they be looking for? Should they be getting Scott Coin?
Scott Leach.
Should they be going to Able Black? What do you want them to do?
Actually, so I got a bunch of Able Black stuff in the works, but nothing ready to share yet, but soon. Right now, a good spot to go is nft.rally.io and search Mystics, MYSTICS. You can get an NFT that gets you access to a small, like 50-person server where we share lots of insight and info on what we're collecting and why.
Do you have some that are available for purchase now?
I think there's 2 or 3 up there that are on the marketplace.
Oh, someone just listed them.
Sale.
You haven't minted any new ones recently.
I think I have a couple that are still listed from the last time I did some things. If someone's actually watching this and you're interested and there aren't any on the Rally.io marketplace, hit me up on Twitter, DM me, and I'll see if I got something I can list or if anyone wants to sell.
I have an extra Genesis token.
Oh, there you go.
And that has all sorts of additional benefits. So I always thought that we would just do something with that. We'll figure it out. That'll be fun to do something. Yeah,
there's something there. I think there's some new rally stuff coming out too that could make those things useful. It'll be exciting to see. I'll share that when I have more info on what's up there. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we should definitely do that. All right. So I'm at Creatorius Rex on the Twitter. Go to niftorius.com to learn about a lot of things we talked about today. Just the news coverage and analysis. We're going to be doing more and more data analysis. It's going to be published there as well. Go to niftorian.com. Join our Discord. See what we're doing. We have the NFT Artist Accelerator. We've been through 4 sessions. Scott's going to present at one next week, which is going to be really interesting. 14 artists, all doing separate projects. Many of them, that's going to be their first NFT experience, all of them are really looking to basically take their NFT game to the next level. That's going to be really fun. And you can have front row seat to that by going to neftorian.com. So like and subscribe. I got to it. It was, an hour into the conversation. Tell people to like and subscribe down below. Yeah. Leave us a comment, any of that good stuff. Until next week, happy hunting, everybody.